Welcome to the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we are joined by John Wyffels, president of Wyffels Hybrids. Now in its third generation of leadership, being fiercely independent is at the core of this family-owned business that is expanding west with a new facility in Ames. This episode is presented by Flynn Wright, Iowa's premier full-service advertising agency, serving clients from coast to coast for over 40 years. Experts in crafting stories that sell, Flynn Wright prides itself on helping brands drive performance and stay one step ahead. John Wyffels, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. How are you?
Eric, hey, good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're on. So, president of Wyffels Hybrids, you are in Ames today. I'm excited that you're here. You've had a busy morning. You helped keynote our ag breakfast this morning and then turn around and come on and record a podcast episode as well.
Yeah, super exciting for me to have the opportunity to share the Wyffels story here locally, particularly as we become new members of the Ames community.
Yeah, I mean, that is super exciting. So I will say, my family and I, we were up in the Twin Cities over a couple days over spring break, and we're driving back, and I'm going down I-35, and I see this big billboard of Wyffels Hybrid, and it says "New Plant in Ames," and so I pointed to my wife, and I was like, this is pretty cool. Like it's establishing your footprint not only in Ames, but using that as an anchor to move west or, expand in the region overall.
Yeah, I think about just the significance of opening this new business, this new location in Ames, and we really felt that it was important to get the story out. What an awesome message to talk about, a company that's growing, that's reinvesting. And so, we definitely put a fair number of billboards up last summer. I had lots of friends and neighbors that, are not all that involved in the seed business saying, hey, I see your Ames site is now open. So those billboards have proved to have quite a residual as well, which is fun.
Well, I mean, it's kind of also evidence like, okay, the messaging is working, at least on some level where people are paying attention.
Yeah, so one of our greatest challenges, Eric, is just unaided awareness, right? If you ask a corn grower in, Iowa, name a corn brand, right? We're not top of mind for everybody, even after 79 years in this business. And so it's a piece that we're working on.
Yeah.
But I think that once we get a chance to work with a grower and, demonstrate to them our product performance and how we serve them, they're pretty quick to name us.
So let's talk a little bit about that story. I mean, you said, 70 some years. So 1946, the company was founded. Mm-hmm. Family owned, continues to be family owned. You're the third generation of it. Right. Give us sort of the elevator pitch type story of Wyffels Hybrids. Is that possible to encapsulate 70 years of a business in a condensed amount of time?
So I love to tell the story, and I can definitely tend to cover a lot of it, but I'll do my best to give you the elevator version of it, Eric. My grandparents got married in 1941. They started farming and started a seed business in 1946. I think the funny thing or unique thing about our story is that we were founded in seed oats, right? So of the top three the top three brands in the Central Corn Belt today, Wyffels was founded in oats. And really, my grandfather was a curious guy. It was all about how do I improve the productivity on my farm, and then in more simpler times, I think it was also, and why not share this knowledge with my friends, with my neighbors, and help them be more successful too? And so that, really quickly led to, wow, that's a pretty outstanding seed oat variety. Do you know where I can get that? And he had some, right? And so I think that's really the foundation for the company. What's interesting is in 1974, at the age of 66, he passes away suddenly and unexpectedly. And so once again, I think the family is forced with a really interesting decision over how do we go forward here? And at that time, not a lot of success, not a lot of history, mom and pop operation, a real intentional decision was made to double down, hire people, build the brand in the countryside, get into the seed business. And that playbook, once that was established, it turned out that was a pretty successful recipe that didn't only work in Henry County, Illinois, but today works really well across 200 counties.
So who helped make that decision? I mean, was that the second generation that had to then help make that decision?
Yeah. So as my grandfather passes away, he's got 6 kids, and my father and uncle were involved in the business in some level at that time. And so they worked with their mother, my grandmother, to determine a path forward. And then the two of them, and eventually their brother-in-law, they worked together on, I think, really defining, what is this brand? What are we going to stand for? And how do we build this business over time?
Isn't it it's incredible? I love the stories of, what could be called humble beginnings. And yet when it comes to that decision making, the groundwork was laid, but yet that decision is like an all-in decision for your family.
Yes.
I mean, your dad and your uncle and others are making that decision, and the future is unknown, as with everything. I mean, and we're going to get to your role as well, but the future is unknown, and it's like, okay, here we go, buckle up.
Yes, the key phrase you just used there, Eric, is all in, and that is exactly what it was. The family was farming row crops, they were raising livestock, but I think if there's one thing that Wyffels has done really well through the years, it's we can't be all things to all people, okay? And so it was really a decision to say, who do we want to be? And we want to get in this corn seed business, and we want to do it as well, if not better, than anybody.
So what was it like growing up in this business? I heard you talk about, I mean, you did it all. I mean, your first paycheck, you're an early teenager. You talked about you're moving pallets around. What was that like?
Yeah, in some ways, I've worked at Wyffels for 11, 12 years full time, but in other ways, I feel like this business has been a part of me for my lifetime, right? A lot of family vacations were tied into company events through the summer, right? My dad, super passionate guy, and the dinner time was a great time to share stories of here's what's going on. Here's a challenge. Here's a lesson learned, right? And so I think that was, maybe building passion in me that I didn't realize was going on as a young guy. And then the chance to work for the company seasonally took it to another level. And I think for a long time, getting a chance to know the people that make this brand go, their passion for the business, just their care, their focus on relationships, it has made it a really compelling place to make a career.
When you were young, I mean, did you really have a choice? Seasonal work?
I vividly remember a conversation with my parents where one of my classmates had started working for Wyffels, and I wasn't working there yet. And that was a real challenge for me over how does this happen, right? Eventually convinced them to sign the parental consent form to let me work, before I'm 18. And I suppose I could have been, lifeguard at the city pool. But I think there was also something in my roots that said, maybe being comfortable with getting uncomfortable was something that was particularly interesting to me.
So I have here your VP of Finance in 2013, president and current role since 2017.
Right.
But when you were growing up, you were moving pallets, you were doing all of the things that teenagers do. Did you go off then and work outside the company?
Yeah. So I think a couple interesting things maybe in my journey growing up. Late 90s was a incredible period of exit for family seed companies. Biotechnology was coming to the seed business. It was coming to the farm. And I think there was a real question, if not concern, over how are these family companies, family brands going to be able to compete? And I think, Wyffels was on the leading edge of how do we get our team, our organization ready for this when this comes? Frankly, I think not only survive but thrive through a bit of that period. But for me, it was, I'm a student in high school and I'm seeing all these family companies exit. And so one of the concerns in my mind is I don't know, if there's an opportunity for me to work here someday. So, went off to college, and an interesting thing happened along the way there where I had a conversation with my parents, and the message was, you're the oldest of the next generation. We want you to go do something else. Maybe more plainly, there's not going to be a job for you here at Wyffels. So in some respects, I think initially it was, wow, what did I do to earn that? But I think also a little bit of maybe some freedom to, go just do something else versus the expectation of, well, of course you're going to return home and work for the family business.
Did that hurt?
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
It was definitely a surprise. I did not see that coming. Yeah.
I don't know how to unpack this. I mean, that kind of feels like it's on one hand like really rewarding to say like you don't have to do this, but then at the other hand, it's we want like it's kind of tough to unpack, for someone who's in their I'm assuming early 20s
Sure.
or around that time. So when did that then turn? So you go off and, you're working outside the company and obviously you're back now and now leading the company. So like, when did that turn for not only, for you, when did that turn?
Yeah. So I think one of the maybe interesting pieces here is the broader picture of the family. And, I have 2 brothers and I have 2 cousins. So 5 in the 3rd generation. I'm the oldest of that group. And I think, one of the other reasons a number of these family businesses were exiting in the 90s was there wasn't always a plan. There wasn't always clarity over who's going to lead the business going forward. And maybe at times, too, a little bit of, kind of myopic thinking over, well, it has to be family. It can't be any other way. So I think as, time passes, my youngest brother eventually becomes the first one to work for the company. And there may have been a little bit of question at some point along the way of, okay, we gave the next generation permission to go do other things. Did this actually work against us at some point, right? Is there going to be someone that eventually is interested? So credit to my youngest brother, Blake, who was the first one to decide to return to the company, and maybe also arm wrestle a little bit to say, hey, I need to work here, right? For the future of this brand. So
what was it like, early on, and then we're going to get to more present day. Were you aware that this was a family run business, or did you have the perspective like, okay, I'm working here seasonally and more often, and like, that's my name, on that brand and on that sign and on, that the packaging.
Yeah. So this is actually really fun for me right now because my son's 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
And every night when I come home from work, I pull into the garage with my Wyffels truck, which has a corn icon on the side of it, right? The brand and the corn icon. And as a young guy, that's one of the first things, like, he just kind of recognizes and he associates it with me. And now he's got a T-shirt that he can wear. And so I think probably a similar thing happened for me, right? Growing up, where, I saw my dad associated with this brand and I attended events that the brand was everywhere. And so, that brand is a really important part of Wyffels' success, Wyffels' story. And I think it's actually pretty interesting in terms of how it has set the next generation up for some passion for the company.
So you've been president since 2017. Is there any story that goes along with that evolution?
So yeah, I think you mentioned that, I started working for the company full time in 2013. That I think one of the questions I often get is, did you always expect to come back and work for the family company? And what I would say is I always had a lot of interest and a passion for what the brand did. And I was excited to do that if the opportunity came up. And so I do feel like I got to a point after, 10, 12 years away from home, kind of establishing myself professionally, and we had a CFO, frankly, that had been with the organization for over 30 years, and he was approaching retirement. And both my dad and my uncle approached me and just said, "Hey, we're going to go hire somebody to do this job, and hopefully for a very long time. Would you like to entertain a conversation? Are you curious? Are you interested in all?" I said, "Absolutely. Let's talk about that." So that's a little bit of maybe backstory for how I joined the business. Just great timing, the right background. And so then I think the minute I walked in the door, Eric, I probably saw the writing on the wall that my dad was going to retire someday. And, some real open conversations to say, "Hey, we think you could do more here if you want to do that someday. How do you want to work together to be ready for that?" So, I just think the family's, in my opinion, been good about thinking about the future, looking ahead, and trying to be prepared for those kinds of events. And so, my dad retires in 2017, and turns out to be one of the better days of my career.
Did you work closely with your dad like during those 4 years?
Absolutely. Yep. He and I were talking on a daily basis. But as you might imagine, I was spending probably as much time learning the financial side of the business as I was learning the commercial side of the business, the broader business. And so he and I spent a lot of time in a truck, traveling the countryside, traveling to meetings together. So I had maybe a few more one-to-ones with him than the average employee.
It's interesting, because then when you make that transition from finance to president, it has to be helpful to have that finance background and understand the company's finances sort of like the back of your hand, because you kind of have to go into autopilot in so much that you can't spend all of your time with that. You have to understand it and trust, whoever the new person is with that, because you have a whole host of other conversations that you're having around the country or the company.
Yes.
What are you and your dad alike or different?
I think we share passion, but I do think there are some differences between our personalities. Yeah.
What was the biggest maybe takeaway or aha moment when you moved into the president role? And I frame that in that you can understand the company, you can understand the culture, you can understand the finances, but when the decision making goes to you as opposed to the person you're sharing a car ride with, it's very different. Even though you probably had all of those 4 years of conversations and you probably even helped inform a lot of the decisions during that time. It just feels different when now it's you and everyone knows it's you. Any takeaways from like those maybe early days from 2017, 2018?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things I would be very quick to compliment my dad on was his, frankly, willingness to just let go. I have had a chance to maybe watch or witness this in a number of other places, right? Whether it be other businesses, maybe, other farm operations, right, that are transitioning from one generation to the next. And I just think my dad was way ahead of the curve in terms of doing that, letting go. And I just, I try and put myself in his shoes at times and just struggle with emotionally, how you do that when you've, kind of built the business for 40 years. I think one other thing that's noteworthy is I do think my cousin and I have tried to probably build different leadership styles than our fathers. And I'm not sure that, theirs was wrong or that ours is better. I do think there's an element or an aspect of the time and the size of the business and the complexity of the business. But, Jacob and I believe very strongly that we need to build an empowered team. We need to make sure decisions are made at the local level, that people have the capability to make those decisions and they're confident in making those decisions. And so I do think that as that transition took place, there probably was a little bit of discomfort for some over who's going to make this decision. And my approach has been much more of I want my team making decisions versus everything runs through the president, right? If we're going to grow, if we're going to move quickly, we have to empower our people.
That's hard sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yep.
Do you still get counsel from your dad? Is he sort of you got this, or is it informal?
Yeah, I would say that we don't have a formal schedule. I think that he's always available and willing to talk when I have a question. But, in my opinion, rarely would he impose a view or say, you need to do this.
But it is different now.
Yeah.
I mean, every 30-year period, it's or what insert whatever arbitrary amount of time,
Right.
It's different, and leadership has to be different because it has to respond to that time and the goals that the company currently has.
Right. I completely agree with that.
How do you continue to instill the principles and values? Because I've heard you talk about how those originate from the first generation and 70 years ago. So how do you continue to keep those alive across the business and in a business and company that's growing?
Yep. Great challenge for us. I will say that this was a point that I made that, as my dad retired and I became the leader of the business, I felt like it was really important that people understand clearly what those values are. And I think, previously there was a lot of institutional knowledge. Wyffels has, a lot of great fortune with employees coming and working at the business and staying at the business for a long time because they find it so purposeful. But, as you said, as we grow and as we scale, there's risks that, as we add new team members, how do they understand the culture and the values of the company? So we made a very intentional effort, first and foremost, to write them down, right? Let's identify what they are, right? Let's make sure we can really kind of focus them to 4 or 5 values. So we got them written down. And then my big push has been, how do we tell stories, right? How do we make sure that we're not just putting values on the wall, but that we're actually living them? And so one of the ways I like to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable there is to talk about stories of people demonstrating these values. And I think the next journey that we're on is not only saying, these are our values, but these are the behaviors that illustrate the values, right? There might be 2 or 3 behaviors that are great examples. And how do we then back that up into our hiring process so that as we're talking to candidates about joining the company, they understand this is what Wyffels stands for, and then they can decide for themselves, man, I really like that, or that's not what I expected, and I'm not sure if that's for me. So I think it gets us moving quicker, and I think it means longer partnerships between employer and employee.
So as a company, how do you keep up with an ever-changing landscape in agriculture? I mean, Between the 3 generations, it's very different from the first generation when we're talking about precision ag and just farming practices in general. How as a company do you, in many ways, keep up with the times, but also push forward and be that brand that is the leader in that?
Yep. So I think a couple things go through my mind as you ask that question. One would be making sure that we're looking forward, and that we've got a pulse on where things are going, right? Where are growers going? Where's technology going? Where's the market going? And so I think we do a reasonably good job of encouraging people to make sure that it's not just head down and do your job all the time, that you're finding the time and space to understand the broader picture, broader perspective. I think that there's business pieces to this as well, in terms of how do you scale a business properly, right? How do you go from 250 to 500 employees someday? And so one of the things that we've done as a family is we've broadened our family board to say we're going to invite some independent directors into the boardroom to share their experiences growing companies with us. because I'll just admit, if I haven't been through some of those really important experiences, I kind of don't know what I don't know. And so it's really important for us to, I think, get that perspective. And I'm excited that we're on that journey.
Do you seek a lot of input from your team and probably immediate team?
Yeah. I have a team that I meet with once a week. Monday afternoons, we get together. We spend pretty much the duration of the afternoon. And I think we do a good job of balancing not just the operational tactical pieces of, what has to get done now, but also talking about the strategic pieces that are, 3 years or 5 years from now, because we do have a 2030 objective. And I believe that, we're only going to hit that 2030 objective if we're, communicating regularly and we've got, kind of arms locked on the direction we're heading.
Is it a lot of nuts and bolts in those types of meetings, or is it more nuts and bolts over vision and strategy, or is it a good balance?
I think it's pretty balanced. I think it's fairly 50-50. And I think one of the things I'm excited about, one of the ways our team has evolved is it's not just people giving, progress reports or status updates, right? It's a lot of we're here to work issues. We're here to work topics, right? Let's debate, let's make a decision, and let's get to the right answer, to a better answer.
Do those get intense?
Sure. In John's opinion, as a leader of the group, if we're not disagreeing, we're not going to get to the best answer for the business. So,
as much as uncomfortable as sometimes those meetings are, and I've sat in them as well, I find that those types of meetings where you can hash it out and disagree or agree or whatever it is, it creates bonds that supersede many other things, many other problems, because you have this trust level within your team where okay, the best decision is going to be made collectively. And it's not just your decision or my decision or insert whoever. It's the best decision for the company.
That's right. I think, we do a good job of, kind of reminding ourselves of our North Star. Why do we exist, right? What's our purpose again? And it's all about serving the corn grower in the pursuit of a more productive and profitable crop. So keep that front and center. Reminding ourselves of our values is really important. Then I think our strategy, we've done a good job of building a balanced strategy that says, we're going to focus on customers, people, building a better business, continuing to reinvest. And, as long as those continue to be in a reasonable balance, and no one, kind of rules the day, I think we continue to be successful and we continue to grow.
This episode of the Area Podcast is sponsored by...
You have a story to tell. That story has a job to do, to be seen, to be heard, to sell, to find inspiration and insight, to use persuasion to change behavior, to turn strategy into tactics, tactics into action, to sell. Nobody does that better than Flynn Wright.
Continental Manufacturing Chemists, located in Huxley, Iowa, is a leading producer of oral care and animal care products for major brands across the United States. Since 1961, they have been a manufacturer of toothpaste, mouthwash, along with shampoos, conditioners, and many other products. As their company continues to expand, they are seeking passionate individuals to join their team, and they are hiring across all shifts. What truly sets Continental Manufacturing Chemists apart goes beyond their advanced equipment and diverse product lines. The heart of the organization lies in its commitment to its team members. In an era where many organizations face challenges in recruiting and retaining talent, CMC has managed to grow significantly because they put company culture first. You can learn more about Continental Manufacturing Chemists and apply online through their website.
It all started with the mulch colorant that made our name. And now, Color Biotics manufactures millions of pounds of product month after month, bringing brilliance and resilience all around the world. And as we look ahead, all we see is growth. A growing customer base and growing sales mean a growing team. From the lab to the field, backyards to ball fields, and beyond. We need vivid imagination, intense passion, and brilliant ideas. If that sounds like you, we have one question. Are you ready to get to work? Colorbiotics.com/careers.
So let's talk about your move here to Ames. So, Wyffels Hybrid is based out of Illinois, but now you have a footprint here in the Ames region. So after 15 months of construction, you officially opened your Iowa site in July of 2024, just outside of Ames. How did you make the decision to come to this region?
Yeah, I like the simplicity, the way you described how we got here, right? And it just happened over a period of months. But in all honesty, you're right. I think a little bit of backdrop for people. The company was founded in Atkinson, and that today is where our production facility is located. And I would argue it's one of the most cutting-edge seed production facilities in the globe. I mean, we've invested a lot there in the last 10 years to really make that a first-class operation. Then in Geneseo, about 15 minutes to the west, we have our research station and our office. And I think, for decades, there have been dreams and aspirations about having some sort of, Western footprint, beachhead. And I would tell you that probably 6 to 7 years ago, we started having the conversation about another operation. Can you imagine something that's more than a 15-minute drive away, right? I mean, that's a little bit of where the conversation starts. And I think we pretty quickly grasped reality, which was, we can't have all of our seed production, we can't have all of our inventory in one location if we're really serious about this business. And so we realized that, we've got customers in Brookings, South Dakota that are 8 hours from Atkinson, a real struggle to reach, both, from a shipping standpoint, but also just the relationship connectivity side. We bring people to our Atkinson plant year-round to see the operation. And so a real chance for us to get closer to our customers, to be able to interact with them at our location and show them the brand, our passion for quality, our passion for the business. And so, admittedly, the last 3 years have been a lot more intense in terms of acquiring some land just outside of Ames, between Ames and Nevada, and building that location. And so super excited that, we're open and running today.
Yeah. So what are initial takeaways? I mean, this summer, it's not even a year yet, but this summer will mark a year of that being open. And I paraphrased it as, and you did too, it's sort of your gateway to moving west. Sure. South Dakota, I referenced the billboard up in Minnesota,
right.
Ames kind of can be a hub for that. So what have been takeaways?
Yeah, I think that there were probably 3 to 5 things on the front side that were really important to us that I think continue to be true today. As I described, first and foremost, we wanted a Western location. And I think in addition to being west, it was okay. Logistically, if you're on Interstate 80 and Interstate 35, there's just a lot of ways you can reach people pretty quickly. I think that, a great opportunity for us to expand our seed production acres, and no doubt Central Iowa has some great growers, some great dirt to be able to do that. We talked a little bit about talent and the ability to continue to have access to talent for this generational business. I have no question Ames will be able to do that. And then collaboration with institutions like Iowa State and DMAC, and frankly, other folks that participate in this industry, right? There is some collaboration that takes place on developing new technologies for the farm to add value. And so, we're reasonably close to be able to do some of those things.
I mean, it is an impressive facility. I was at the groundbreaking event, which was very small, and yes, I breezed over the 15 months of construction, but now that it's open, 188,000 square foot facility, warehouse with repackaging. I think Steve on your team out there, he said, we have 3 acres all underneath a roof. And it was just expansive in the amount of just seed that was in there, and he kind of walked me through the process of it'll move from this room to this room and then onto a semi and then out the door. And the whole production was really impressive to me.
Yeah, I think one of the moments that hit home for me was when somebody was describing the size of a Costco warehouse, right, or store, right, very similar to what we built there in Ames. So to give people kind of scale of the operation, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, we've got climate controlled storage there, which is important for us, for our seed, and our customers to have great quality for them. And we've got some repack capability so that as returns take place this spring, we hope everybody's able to plant every last acre of corn that they wish to, but sometimes varieties switch and weather things happen. So as things come back, we'll be in a position to be able to repack those items for the following season. So
was this one of those all-in type decisions? I mean, obviously you were going to choose a spot, and you chose Ames, and clearly we're thankful for that. But the facility that you have there now is not the end of what could be. I mean, you are starting to plan what the next, 10, 15 years could potentially look like. Yeah. But that feels all in to me.
It really is, Eric. I mean, when I think about building this business, it could absolutely be a 10-year project. And we may find ways to make it a 20-year project because it's going so well. Yeah. So what I often share with people is if you think about all the infrastructure and investment we've made in Atkinson to produce seed, and then you think about the things we're doing in Geneseo, which includes 80 acres of research trials, a research station, an office, right? All that together is, I think, on the table for what we do in Ames someday. So now we just got to go execute, right?
One of the things that really struck me about Wyffels Hybrid when, just going through your website and social media is your brand presence. And it was very easy for me to observe that as a company, you have put an emphasis on this. Yep. You have put an emphasis on your brand. It's obviously it's strong with the black and yellow, but the things that really I appreciated was your emphasis on, and the company's emphasis on utilizing multimedia, storytelling, videos. In my experience, companies who invest in that, they do really stand out. But I also understand that it has to be a conscious decision, and it's very easy to not allocate important resources into those things. So walk me through that process for Wyffels.
Yeah. So I think that as the company has had a lot of success and has grown over the last 12 years, that didn't just start one day. There were some very intentional efforts, some decisions, some things that were done to set us up for that. And I do believe that one of the things that was most important along the way was really coming back to say, what does the Wyffels brand stand for? What is the personality of this brand? And let's make sure that people understand that very, very clearly. So, you go back to 2008, 2009, I think the team really started to get to work on that, and credit to them to really, I think, help people understand that this is a fiercely independent brand, and that we're performance driven. So we hope your combine's hungry, and as a team, we're a wholly owned subsidiary of nobody. So there have been some really, I think, impactful pieces along the way that has set that up. And then you're right, we've driven it, and we've driven it, in a number of ways. Whether it's through print, TV, online more recently. The pandemic was, I think, frankly, one of the silver linings that came out of that was when we found it more challenging to get in front of people, we realized, well, we have to find another way to reach them, right? And so video was one of those ways. We said we can create short online digital videos that help us tell the story, what we stand for, and the team has really leaned into that.
Well, I'll give the entire company credit for that because I know what it takes to make those things, and like I mentioned, it is a conscious effort, and so I appreciate that. I'll give you a couple more that I wrote down, and now these are on semis. Contents may be habit forming. I like it. For higher yields, follow this truck. It's funny. I mean, it makes me smile even as I'm reading them. Here's another one on a semi. Explosive yield. That's our loyalty program. I love it. And then just recently, I saw on social media, you're leaning into March Madness and talk about committed, not entering the transfer portal. And many of these, in addition to one that you already mentioned about being fiercely independent, they're a callback to the family-owned company in many ways. And I think if you know that, it's easy to see, but you can appreciate a lot of this branding and messaging, even if you don't. I would imagine most of your customers and clients know at least some of your story already, but I'm sure as you enter into new markets, they don't know that story, but I think stuff like this can certainly make Wyffels stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it is realizing that, you know, we're absolutely different. We're not afraid to be different, and we're not afraid to let people know that. So that is absolutely part of the messaging that we're trying to make clear to people.
I saw a picture of the fourth generation, and you mentioned there are how many? 6 kids under 5 years old in the fourth generation. And what will it be like for them growing up in the Wyffels family? I mean, they're not going to be able to dodge this. I mean, it's going to be, they're going to see their name, everywhere, specifically, your kids and others. So, what's that look like? Suddenly, I mean, this is going to go full circle again, just as you talked about you growing up in the family, and now the next generation, you're growing, helping, raise those kids in this family.
Yeah. I think that you're right that this is something that as a family we're going to need to be really intentional about. I give my father and my uncle a ton of credit for, I think, certainly giving us all the exposure that we wanted, but not really setting any extreme pressure or expectations for us. My dad had just a consistent refrain that I remember growing up, which was, I want my kids to be happy, right? I want them to do what's going to make them happiest in life. And I think that's a recipe for success. But I would tell you, I'm just extremely excited and happy to be a part of this business, part of this brand. What I don't think I realized as a kid, before joining the business, was just the opportunity a family business can have to make an impact on people's lives. I think about employees that have retired from Wyffels after 30 or 40 or more years, and some of the stories that they've shared just about, how working at Wyffels allowed them to, continue to keep food on the table, to help them save for their kids' college, and really just improve their lives. And I think that, as much as I'm excited to help 10,000 family farmers be successful and transition the farm to the next generation, just like we hope to someday, I don't lose sight of the local impact we can make in communities where our employees and our seed reps live and, make great lives.
As much as we talked about over the generations, how, leadership styles, they can change and they can be responsive to the times, it's also pretty rewarding to think about the things that are timeless. You want your kids to be happy. You want your customers to be happy. You want the people who, wear the brand Wyffels Hybrids, on their shirts and they go to work every day. You want them to be happy, and stuff like that. It just transcends generations. But I think it's really impactful to hear you say that that's something that you think about regularly, and it's not just forgotten, amongst the finances and the busyness of what any company, experiences, is that you have to go back to that, and that almost number one. I mean, that's the thing that you need to ensure to be successful.
I think that any leader is going to go through challenging times, no matter how prepared their team is, no matter how solid the strategy is. There are just going to be challenges at times. And so how do you survive those challenging times, right? I think it's to make sure that you've got a really solid North Star. You know why you're doing what you do. And I think the things that you just talked about, right, in terms of helping people and family farmers be successful and helping everybody that works at Wyffels full-time, part-time, or the seed reps that we work with, helping make an impact for them, that helps you. That helps you get through some of those tougher times.
So do you have a professional win from the last week? Anything that stands out?
Oh, man, that's a really good question. Yes, I do. So here in March, we opened our 4th location. We have an office in Davenport, Iowa. And one of the things that we were looking for is we were on the search for more office space, was frankly a great team space, a great team room. Because I know that as this company grows, we're going to need to be even more purposeful around some of the talent development efforts that we do. And so we do have an operational leadership group that gets together once a month. And so here in March, we got to bring that team together in that new space for the first time ever. And I would just tell you that, it was a bit of a journey to get to that point, but it was also pretty rewarding to be in our own space. And I think for me, just a bit of a milestone of some outstanding things on the horizon to help our people be even better.
Well, John Wyffels, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast.
Pleasure, Eric. I really enjoyed the chance to share a little bit more about our story.
Well, this is tons of fun. And also thank you for keynoting our Ag Breakfast. And quite honestly, thanks for being in Ames.
You're very welcome. And you're right. We are excited to be a part of the Ames community now and looking forward to different ways we can continue to make an impact here too.
For those listening, if you like this episode of the Area Podcast, we would sure love if you could subscribe and certainly talk about it and share it with others. This is the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance, personal stories, professional journeys.